or from the officers involved. So we stay off the radio. It's a sacred thing. You don't break the code red unless you really have to get on the radio.
And where do you respond to?
We responded to the intersection of Koval and Flamingo right there at the Maxim Hotel. Now it's called the Westin. But we went into the parking lot on the south side of the Maxim, and where we saw a patrol unit.
At some point, do you walk out onto Flamingo? Well, let me ask you this. When you first arrive, is there traffic still driving eastbound on Flamingo?
Yes, I mean, nothing's changed so far as traffic at that point, because whatever had happened was several minutes before that. So now people are still just driving by. We got to the parking lot. My Sergeant Cindy West, had inquired as to where the shots had come from, and we were able to look out into the street there on Flamingo, just west of Koval, and I saw in the headlights just little glints of light and recognized that. I spent plenty of time on a firing range, and I know what brass looks like on the ground. So we were able to determine where several cartridge cases were located in the street west of Koval on Flamingo.
I'm going to approach and show you State's Proposed Exhibit 34 to 41. As you look through those, I'm going to grab something from the clerk. Do you recognize those?
I do.
And how do you recognize those?
When we spotted the cartridge cases in the street, at the time my enforcement vehicle was a Chevy van, and we had a whole bunch of cones. So as we located the cartridge cases there on the roadway, we took a bunch of cones out of my vehicle and actually placed them, in the photographs you'll see it a little bit different, but we placed the cones on top of or over the cartridge cases, so the cones protected where they were located. Because you could even see there was at least, I know one for sure, maybe more, that had already been run over by traffic, so it was a little bit mangled. So we protected the crime scene, and we also popped a couple of flares on the north side of the number 3 travel lane where the cartridge cases are located.
And this State's Exhibits 34 through 41 fairly and accurately represent that situation.
Yes, it is.
Move to admit.
No objection, Your Honor.
So admit it.
So I'm going to put up 34. And can you just describe for us what we're looking at?
So you can see the cartridge cases are kind of straddling the 2 lanes.
I'll stop you for a second, Mr. O'Kelly.
Yes.
There's a mouse sitting right there. Don't click it. Just it'll freeze up the whole system, but you can use it as a pointer.
Exactly. So these 2 cones that we set up here were more or less to protect where the cartridge cases were located. These other cones are covering the actual cartridge cases in the roadway. The one that's closest to us in this picture is a bullet fragment. It was the furthest away from Koval, and then the other cones are all spent cartridge cases, Winchester, Smith & Wesson 40 caliber cartridge cases.
Do you know a person by the name of Dan Ford?
Yes, I do.
How do you know Dan?
Dan Ford is a senior crime scene analyst that I worked with quite a bit. We started on the department right around the same time, and ran into him several times on cases that I worked with in the gang unit investigations. We also utilized him on the RICO task force that I was on for a couple years, and then he responded countless homicide investigations during my career.
Eventually, does Mr. Ford leave the crime scene that was at Harmon and Las Vegas Boulevard and come, and is he the person that takes these pictures and winds up collecting these items?
Yes, he is. Fortunately, Dan was already dispatched to the area of the Maxim for the patrol units that had called out on the radio the shots that were fired. They were taking a report for damaged vehicles that were there, and Dan had already been dispatched to that. So he wasn't far away when the shots rang out, and he was requested to come to that scene.
Sitting there in front of you is state's proposed exhibit 129. Looking at state's proposed exhibit number 129, do you recognize what that item is?
Yes, I do. I've seen and reviewed the handwritten evidence inventory that was authored by Dan Ford. I can see that that's his handwriting. It's also his initials and P number that are on the package for the Winchester cartridge cases.
And then there's a red seal on the back of here. That would have been placed on by Mr. Ford, correct?
The red seal is not, so it is marked up here at the top for his P number. This doesn't look, I don't know, that he wrote the date on that. So 9/7 of 96. So he initialed in the top corner and then put the date down in the bottom corner, yes.
And all these blue seals are the times that the forensic lab has opened this package in order to look at these items and potentially do some testing.
That's correct. But I do remember from the evidence inventory that Dan had indicated that these cartridge cases were checked for fingerprints at the time with negative results.
So I'm going to have, well, I guess I'll move to admit 129, Judge.
No objection.
Okay, so admitted.
I'm going to have you cut this not along the seal if there's a place left to
Is
do
there a
it.
place?
I think if we cut right along there, we can pull those items out.
Oh yeah, down here at the bottom I can. I don't think we have to go too far. Just do that.
And we just pull those items out. These, well, they will eventually be marked 129 G, A through G, but I'm going to show you this one, which has a 14 on the top of it. And you said you remember at least one of them was mangled.
Mm-hmm. This one's flattened on the opening opposite of the head stamp. It's flattened, so it's been run over.
And there appears to be at least one more of these that has some damage to it. And several will have damage to it.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
They're definitely misshapen. A couple of them are. This is actually the closest that I've seen them, because when we came out, we just put the cones right over the top of them, didn't mess with them at all. So I'm able to now look at even the primer impacts, which is significant.
Why is that significant?
Because a Glock pistol has a rectangular opening for the firing pin. It's vertically oriented on the front of the bolt face for a Glock pistol, and you can tell by looking at the primer impact that that's roughly the shape of the impact on the primer.
So that suggests to you that the weapon was a Glock 40.
That's correct.
Now, Detective, or I guess it's Mr. O'Kelly now.
Detective retired. I don't know. Deputy Marshal.
Yeah, Deputy Marshal, there you go. While you're at the scene, are you getting updates on the radio as to potential suspect vehicles that you should be looking for?
Periodically, again, that code red is in effect for quite a while, so there's not a lot of radio traffic that was going on. The call came in initiating the code red at 11:17 we were a short distance away, and we went code. Well, we ran code, so we did lights and siren. It didn't take us very long to get there. I know that Sergeant West waited until there was a complete lull in the radio traffic and announced that we were en route and arrived at the same time, and I believe that was at 11:26. We had been there before that, so we were there before 11:20. We were already there at the scene. So at about a little bit past 11:30, we got an update on the rough description of a light-colored Cadillac. I know at some point on the CAD report it said late 90s. It had to be late 80s, right? This is 96. And there was also some indication that it was in good condition, which would say that it was an older vehicle than late 90s, right? So we were looking for a light-colored, possibly white Cadillac with two black male occupants. And there was a report that it was northbound on Audrey, which now Audrey Lane is the Link, right? It's the Link lane. So it's on the west side of the Maxim going north. There was some report that possibly that's where the suspect vehicle had gone.
So initial reports is light color Cadillac, last seen northbound on Audrey.
Right, with two black males at that point.
Do you wind up getting updates throughout the evening as to the vehicle you're looking for?
We did. I'd say it was about an hour or so, about 1:45 maybe, right around that time, that we got an update that we were looking for that same white Cadillac in good condition, but potentially occupied now by four black males, and was southbound on Koval. That made a little bit more sense to us, especially that we were out on the eastbound lanes of Koval, right just short of the intersection, and that the Cadillac had to have been to the south of the BMW, and it made more sense that they would have made a right turn. So that definitely clicked when we were told they were southbound on Koval.
Does there come a point in time when you do what's known as an ATL or attempt to locate that particular vehicle?
Yes. Thankfully, because Dan Ford was not too far away, we were able to get relieved from our protection of the crime scene where the cartridge cases were located. And I think we cleared exactly an hour after the initial code red was called. And that was the first thing that we did was we went south on Koval. We checked areas that we frequented in the gang unit, looking for potentially really any light-colored Cadillac. And the kind of the yellowish lights that we have in town, the street lights that they use for low, so it's not too much light in town. Those can kind of throw you off on color. So we were looking for any light-colored Cadillac.
We'll put back up State's Exhibit 1. During all this time period that you and your partner ATL'd for this white Cadillac, did you ever drive into the parking lot of the carriage house?
No, I can say that in my 35 years, I've never been in the carriage house.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Okay, cross-examination, Mr. Sam.
Sorry, sir, what's your last name again?
O'Kelly, O''K-E-L-L-E-Y.
Mr. O'Kelly, thank you for being here today. Your testimony, obviously, I would imagine before you were here, you probably reviewed your reports, whatever it is you wrote during that time period.
I didn't write any.
Okay.
Certainly, even after I went to homicide, I wasn't involved in the investigation for this case. I did review the CAD report, the computer-aided dispatch report, noting those times. I don't have that great a memory, so I'm going to have to tell you that. And that handwritten evidence inventory by Dan Ford. I have both copies right here in my notebook.
I see. So at the time you retired as a homicide detective?
I did.
And then at that point, you came back to work as in the cold case unit as an investigator.
I did, yes.
All right. Now, a couple things. First of all, when you retired as a detective with homicide, were there any outstanding reports that you had not drafted when you left?
I can tell you that and people love me, so they got a limousine and we had a big party. So as there was a limousine out in front of headquarters at 400 Martin Luther King, I was typing the last officer's report that I needed to personally finish. I was leaving a partner behind whose name is also Dean. So he was able to, tie up any of the cases that we had at that point. But I would say there were, but the ones that I knew I needed to get done before I left, I got done.
And the reason why you prioritized those ones is because I would imagine they're still open investigations and you're handing it off to the next person to continue with your work.
That's correct. It makes it easier for them if it's tied up as best we can.
Right. Did you take any of those cases with you when you went over to the cold case unit?
When I came back to cold case, that was the original reason that I even agreed to do cold case homicide investigation was because of personally had investigated one in particular. So as soon as I came back to cold case homicide, the very first thing I did was go and pull Jamie Sheldon's case and bring it over to my desk. That's the first case that went there, and was able to work. I was honored to be able to work on cases like that and others that I had been a part of when I was a detective, yes.
So in terms of, just explain to the jury what a cold case is. Can you explain that?
Certainly. So a cold case is officially cold when the detectives who are originally assigned to it are no longer there, whether they transferred out or they retired. If there isn't an original detective assigned to the case, it's considered cold. Right? No one's assigned to it. Those cases can be handed off to other detectives that are still in the unit. I remember, when Marty Wildman left the department, he came over to me personally and said, hey, I'm handing Teresa Insana to you. Can you take this case on and continue to follow it up? It's considered cold because he's gone, right? As soon as he left, it's officially a cold case. But if there's a detective who was originally assigned to the case, it's their case until they're done, right? You're not going to go stepping on toes and just pulling cases and start working on other people's stuff unless they asked you to do it.
And with regards to the cold case unit, I'm assuming there's probably two detectives who are the official detectives for the unit, and then you have investigators, retired homicide detectives that help with the investigation?
That's correct. Initially when Sergeant Hefner, sergeant in homicide, but then came back with me at the same time. So the two of us came back and we were on our own. Like we had a sergeant that was assigned to us, but basically they were a signature block. We could pull any case that we wanted and work on those. The department saw, thankfully, a lot to do with the work that we were getting accomplished, where we solved 20, 25-year-old cases, and the department's able to go to the media and say, look, we're not giving up after all these years. We're going to continue to follow these cases and solve them. Because of that success level, then the department dedicated 2 full-time detectives that were still in homicide to the cold case unit. And then we had, I want to say 3, 4 more cold case investigators that were assigned to us. So I think we had a total of 5 or 6 at one point, plus the 2 detectives and a dedicated sergeant to the cold case unit.
So in terms of your work in the cold case as an investigator, you're not a detective, right?
No.
So there is a difference in terms of your responsibilities versus the responsibilities of a detective.
Correct.
Because the detective would be the law enforcement officer.
Certainly.
And you are a person helping the law enforcement officer.
Essentially, we can still steer the investigation where we want it to go. We're doing interviews, we're doing those things, but say authoring a search warrant. So we run into a situation where we need a search warrant done. It's going to be It may get written by one of us, but it's going to be sworn to as an affidavit by a detective on the department who's a sworn police officer.
Have you ever drafted a report, I don't know, 8 years after you started an investigation?
Well, because of cold case, yes, certainly.
But
Yeah.
just as a police officer or a detective, have you ever waited, say, years to draft an actual report on something?
I don't know what would be my record-breaking delay in authoring a report, but I'd say, you know, if you're dealing with a case where there's nobody in custody, like you haven't arrested anybody, I mean, it probably pushing 2 years before I finally said, you know, and even reluctantly said, all right, I'm gonna close this officer's report. It's signed off because we've run out of investigative leads. We're to that point. There's really nothing else coming in, and now that's officially done. Then there could be maybe somebody calling up, or we could have somebody that gets in a jam, right, where they're now looking at serious time. This has happened to us in cold case, where now that person says, hey, I have information on a murder. So now it's completely open. Now the case is back up and running, and there would be a new officer's report started at that point in time to complete that investigation. I know where the gun is, I know who did the shooting, and now we've got a solved case after 15, 20 years.
Now, have you ever delayed writing an officer's report after going to the grand jury and presenting evidence on that same case?
Yeah, I would say that I've gone to grand jury before officers' reports are done. I would say that I've gone to grand jury before I've started an officer's report. Again, because for me personally, and for a lot of the guys that I work with, I'm not completely OCD, but I mean, there's things that I need to get done, or I'm not going to be able to sleep, that kind of thing. You may feel that way. But I always get the case management form started and maintained up to date. It's going to be up to date. If you make a phone call to me, I'm going to document a date, time, phone call, right? That may not go into the ultimate officer's report because it's superfluous information, didn't mean anything, but I'm going to keep that record in the CMF. I might not even start the officer's report for months, and grand jury may have already happened. Now, I feel now some pressure to get that done, right? Because if I'm going to grand jury, more than likely we have somebody in custody, and I want the district attorney's office to have the benefit of a completed officer's report, although it's not necessary.
Right. And so if you had submitted it to the grand jury or done your grand jury, you're telling us at some point you could delay finalizing your officer's report.
Yes.
Okay. Now, would you delay that officer's report until after you retire?
Well, because I still have a partner that hasn't retired, I can have confidence in doing that. You know, we definitely did have that happen. I recall specifically a double murder that was not, the officer's report wasn't done when I left, because I knew Dean was going to be, Detective Rates was going to be continuing on with it.
Right, so you knew that the other detective would still be the detective handling the case through because you are now retired.
No question.
But what if you didn't have that detective there, that you're a partner? Would you have delayed after you retired to draft your officer's report?
I would not.
How about...
I wouldn't be able to do it, right? I mean, I just know that I wouldn't be able to do it. That's why when, the limo's out in front of headquarters, I'm typing an officer's report. I literally I got the officer's report done and then went downstairs. I was done. I was retired.
Now, can you explain to us, I'm sorry for interrupting, but can you explain for us a little bit about why reports are so important to you in your line of work as a homicide detective?
Reports document everything, right? I mean, you need to document your observations. You need to document evidence. And for us, in homicide or even in the gang unit before that, we did that with officers' reports. Officers' reports don't become evidence, right? Officers' reports are so anybody picking up that case file can walk through the investigation from beginning to the last part of an officer's report is conclusion, right? So it may be a conclusion as to what you believe happened and you don't have somebody in custody. It can be a completed officer's report where the case isn't solved. It's still open, right? But it's at that point when you're doing the conclusion, it's more or less your opinion. This is what we believe based on everything else that precedes it in the officer's report.
Okay. And that would, of course, help you later if you ever were called to testify in front of a jury to recall what happened.
Oh, absolutely. That's the go-to document for somebody who's preparing for trial is that officer's report. I mean, it can be lengthy. I've written officer's reports that are 70 pages long.
And with regard to those reports and being 70 pages long, fair to say that details are super important when we're doing this kind of investigation.
They are.
And that would be helpful for you to remember details in the future, right, to write a good report.
Right, the more extensive and the more detailed your report, the better off you're going to be, the more prepared you're going to be. But in addition to that, you could be documenting things that you observed or that you knew at the time you were doing the investigation that you don't realize were important, right? So I could document something in a crime scene that seems like it's innocuous, something that's just doesn't seem like it's that important. And then later on, when maybe a suspect's in custody or, the investigation's further, then you find out, oh, that one item that you made a note of now becomes important because the suspect touched it or that was the murder weapon that was cleaned up and stuck over there and nobody realized it.
Now, let's shift gears a little bit here. So you're no longer a detective, you're now working with a cold case. Have you taken on any cold cases that weren't yours to begin with?
Certainly.
And what is typically the standard operating procedure when you are starting your investigation as a cold case investigator?
So you're pulling the case file, right? And it can be extensive, depending on the murder, depending on the case that you're looking at, can be rather extensive. Some of the cases that we were pulling had pouches in them with VHS tapes, right? There were separate boxes that had VHS tapes in them. We probably may even know what a VHS tape. So, and we had cassette tapes, right? Actual physical cassette tapes. So we had to maintain a VHS player in homicide to be able to review those things. So we had some of the archaic methods to review evidence. We would go through the entire case file, and that would give us a starting point. As you might imagine, what we're looking for in cold case, because of the advances in technology, is do we have any trace evidence that wasn't analyzed? Do we have any fingerprints that weren't analyzed? Do we have any DNA that maybe, this precedes DNA? We looked at some cases that were before I was born. Okay, it's my 65th lap around the sun. We were looking at cases before I was even on this planet. So you go through the entire thing and you try and make his heads or tails of where the detective took that investigation to that point. Sometimes that could be difficult, especially if you're dealing with one of those Post-it people, right? You're dealing with one of the ones that were writing notes on cocktail napkins and stuff and keeping them in the case file. We'd pull little notes that were like, I have no clue how this relates to the investigation at all. Don't know if they talked to this person, didn't talk to this person. Was this a witness? Was this a secondary victim? We didn't know. So we'd have to try and track those down. And some of the cases were so old that, people that we were dealing with, they're deceased.
Did you have any success with what you did on the cold case unit?
Oh, certainly, yeah. We closed quite a few.
So when you say closed, meaning that you were able to find out basically the information you needed, the suspect or whatever the case was?
Yes, absolutely. All the way through to an arrest and prosecution and conviction, yes.
And with regards to the success you had on the cold case, did any of those cases not involve some type of technological thing like either a trace, DNA, or fingerprints?
I think I'd say there was none come to my mind that we didn't have something that was redone and reviewed and then came to a conclusion or pointed to a specific person that we were then able to go and interview. We had one where we flew to Toledo and we got a confession on a murder that happened here in Las Vegas because that person was already doing life without there for another murder that he had committed. I don't recall that we had any physical evidence in there that we needed. He confessed to it basically. What do I have to lose? I'm already doing life without.
So he basically was in custody ready for a murder in another state and basically
Columbus,
confessed and said, hey, I'm confessing to this murder in Nevada.
Correct.
So it wasn't like you found,
We did. I mean, there's, you look at some of these case files and they're definitely pointing towards a specific person, right? Every indication is that this is who you're dealing with.
Right.
And that it just didn't, you couldn't get it across the finish line, right? And like Jamie Sheldon, I brought up earlier, I know who did that murder, but it's whether or not there's enough to get across the finish line with that piece of evidence that's going to be where the district attorneys are willing to take that case to trial. And you're waiting for that one more thing, right? So it just stays there waiting for that one more piece of evidence to come in. And that happened with some of the cold cases where it's like, hey, we knew who this person was. I remember one specifically where we had a guy where we knew in the gang unit who we were looking for. And then I got to homicide and then looked up case files and saw that that person had never been charged. I'm like, how did he never get charged? We knew who it was. And we were able to then put enough together to arrest him and get a conviction.
And the arrest was because of either DNA or fingerprints or something along those lines?
And that one, no, we had video surveillance that existed at the time on a VHS tape from a 7-Eleven, back when they were recording over them every 7 days, and so it was grainy, and you're like trying to get a clear enough picture. But we were able to, and we had physical evidence at the time that existed at the time connecting him to other cases, and we were able to get a conviction on that particular case with nothing new.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. So that was video surveillance with some other physical evidence that helped you solve that particular
Cases, yes.
Okay. All right. And then in terms of your work, the night of what happened here, now if I could just ask to switch over to. Are you, does this help a little bit here about just zoning into what's, zooming into where this thing happened?
Right, the red triangle, or the red rectangle there is where the cartridge cases are located. Near the intersection, I think the closest piece of evidence was 60 feet away from Koval, and they were out in the travel lane, probably 14, 15 feet away from the south curb.
Okay, so my question's to you very specific. You mentioned a little bit ago about what potentially would be a white Cadillac traveling north on Aubrey. Can you just, you could step out, Dean, if you want, and just actually point with you can just point at the screen from over there so that Jerry can see.
So this is Koval. This is now the Weston, right? It used to be the Maxim. And this is the Aubrey Lane going north. And then down in here is Aubrey Street that actually cuts south and then goes all the way over to the boulevard. But the initial report was that we had this light colored Cadillac occupied by two BMAs that went north on Audrey. So they would have to, with the entourage that everybody had U-turned and gone this direction, they would have to have followed and then turn right to go up on Audrey. There's really no way for you to get from eastbound Flamingo at Koval to northbound Audrey without making a U-turn.
Okay, and just if you could stay there for a second. Dean, the other part here is that I'm just pointing again with my pen, and that would be the area where you found and located the bullets, the cartridge cases?
Cartridge cases, yeah, they're in the eastbound lane, I think the number 3 travel lane, primarily kind of straddling the lane there a little bit, right here before you get to Koval.
Now, if you can describe for us the street. So on that street right there, and I'm just pointing to the part of Flamingo that's, I guess, west of Koval and then before, or between Aubrey and Cobalt, this area here. Is there a concrete divider that's in that area?
There was not a concrete divider, no. And I think now it's like those yellow plastic cones that are every 2 feet. Now separating it when you come up, because on eastbound Flamingo, there's two left turn lanes to go north on Cobalt, 3 travel lanes, and then a right turn lane to go south on Cobalt.
So, for instance, if cars are going to make a U-turn and turn around and follow, like say, for instance, the black BMW, right? The other cars could just basically just make a left-hand turn and go right back. They don't have to go in procession around and keep going. Fair?
Yeah, well, now they would be hitting all those yellow cones. So I don't know. I don't think back then, I think you could probably just right there, I mean, it's a violation of the law.
It is.
Yes, you could certainly make a U-turn there.
Because my understanding is those cones that you're talking about will be actually on Cobalt to prevent people, I guess it's like to stop traffic from merging or having too much lanes or traffic in that area. Do you recall that?
I know all the yellow cones because I took a fellow marshal to the airport yesterday, and the lady in the box actually took me north on Cobalt to pass that intersection. So I was able to see all the yellow plastic. They're permanent cones that are there, dividing the north or east and westbound traffic.
Right, but at the time, your recollection back in 1996, you don't know if there were cones up at that
I
point.
don't know, there wasn't.
Yeah.
I know there wasn't, and there wasn't a Jersey wall, so I think you could just make the turn.
Just
There might
make
have been a curb, there might have been a cement curb, but I don't see that in the photo, and I don't have an independent recollection of it.
Gotcha. So those cars are, if we're trying to envision the BMW getting shot at, and at some point it's making a U-turn, there's some discussion about rims on the vehicle being messed up because of,
Yeah, it's possible.
and then as it's going down, the other cars would have just either just turned around and immediate left.
Possible. I know, because we never went to Harmon and the Boulevard and never saw the entourage, the other vehicles that had gone down there.
Your Honor, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Giacomo?
Briefly.